1940, we looked disaster in the face. Total defeat. German occupation. We were losing the war against the Nazis. As we stared into the abyss, a group of men embarked on a secret mission. And I was one of them. Lieutenant Colonel David Strangeways. I brought together a team of mavericks who could conjure up entire armies out of canvas, wood, and rubber. Nothing was off limits. We even changed the course of the war using a single dead body. No one was allowed to know what we were up to. Our plans, so secret they remained classified for decades. But now it can be told. The remarkable story of how we saved thousands of lives on D-Day, pulled off the biggest deception in history, and helped win the Second World War by fooling Hitler. Dunkirk. It all started with Dunkirk, our last foothold in Europe. And when we were driven into the Channel, it looked like the war was lost. 60,000 of our finest troops missing, wounded, or dead. We were lucky to make it. Others didn't. Soldiers, friends, blown apart in front of me. We took one hell of a beating.
Anyone found a map?
Dunkirk, where one thought kept running through my head. There had to be another way to fight this war. Because if the Nazis had France today, tomorrow they could be in London. I was lucky to make it back alive, but our forces had been decimated. It would take us time to recover, time we didn't have. Hitler had blitzkrieged his way through Europe, and one thing was certain. We were next on his list. The Nazis were coming.
The Battle of France is over. I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free. But if we fail, then the whole world will sink into the abyss of a new dark age.
I'd been seconded to future ops. My mission? To search for new tactics and new talents who could use trickery and cunning to take on Hitler. We were already removing road signs to confuse the enemy, in case we were invaded. And when I heard about some intriguing new camouflage techniques being developed at Shepperton Film Studios, I wanted to take a look. I didn't know it then, but that trip to Shepperton was the beginning of a much longer journey. One which would change my life and reveal how we could win the war.
Lieutenant Colonel Strangeways, future ops.
Ah, yes. Been expecting you. Jolly good. Right, come on. I'll give you the tour. Now, you're not to breathe a word about any of this.
Actually, I've already heard about you and your little toy shop.
Not a bloody toy shop. Exploding light bulb. send in a few commandos, let them play around with the light fittings, and bingo! You've got yourself a nasty shop with the flick of a switch.
Oh, yes. And whose bright idea was that?
We've got set designers, magicians, boffins, model makers, all of them constructing new ideas for winning this war. And Sergeant Granger, our shit specialist.
Yeah, there's a problem with these sheep droppings, Colonel. We need something with a bit more oomph. I just cannot get enough explosive charge inside one of these things. I mean, a cow pat or a camel turd, fair enough, but sheep droppings, no.
Any new ideas?
Now, this is a bit of a departure. Meet Roger. Now, if you're very careful, it's possible to insert an exploding device up the back passage of one of these little fellas. Bit of practice, and one of these fits in perfectly.
Ah, Major Barkus, special visitor.
So, now, if we leave a few of these boys around the enemy base, then either a squarehead comes along, drives over one and says goodbye to his legs, or better still, he spots it, he wants to keep the place clean, he lobs it in the boiler. The result, bang! There is an almighty explosion.
Very good, I like that.
Yeah, and there's room in there for a timing device, too.
Marvellous. Now, Colonel Turner, what on earth is all this about?
Granger's job is to dream up unpleasant little toys for our spies and the French resistance, people like that. Small scale, but nonetheless effective. Whereas this plane is going to help us pull the wool over Hitler's eyes. That's so long as we can convince the top brass that we're not a bunch of time wasters.
But it's made out of canvas.
Precisely. Barkus, fill him in, will you?
Visual deception may be divided into concealment, which is the hiding of war installations and forces, and display, which is the deliberate exposure of such things. These consist of the exposure of dummy forces aimed at provoking a predetermined reaction by the enemy.
You see, truth may be the first casualty of war,
Four men can erect
but a
one
lie
dummy in 10 minutes.
can save more lives than any machine gun.
Can easily set up a squadron. In this scene, which are real aircraft and which dummies? Who can tell? Certainly not the enemy.
Turner's department opened my eyes. Trickery and deception could be a powerful weapon, especially when we were so weak. On the south coast of England, there wasn't a single working tank. I realized then that to beat the Führer, we couldn't just fight him. We'd have to fool him too. But the war would teach me we'd need much more than canvas planes and decoy airfields to pull the wool over Hitler's eyes. Turner was the beginning. But I was going to need a whole team of talents to launch an operation more ingenious, daring and outrageous than any war had ever known. (1940). The Luftwaffe was trying to bomb us into submission. Britain was burning. To fight back, we started building decoy airfields all around the country, hoping to divert enemy bombers from their real targets. But in those early days, we had, well, plenty of teething problems.
All right, men. Battle stations. The ruffians are on their way, flying over the Hook of Holland as we speak. I want all decoys battle ready and information.
Anyone would think he was commanding a real squadron. Come on.
Right on time. Here we go! Get ready with some fireworks. Let's hope they've taken the bait.
What is it?
Take a look.
I'm afraid we've been rumbled, lads.
A wooden bomb. The Germans were taunting us. They seemed to know our every move. Our operation was in its infancy. We were naive, unsophisticated, and all learning on the job. Especially our latest recruit from the War Office, The best-selling novelist, Dennis Wheatley, whose imagination sometimes got the better of him.
Really, Dennis, where did you go to school?
Dulwich College, a fine establishment.
I thought you were expelled.
Aye, a minor indiscretion.
Well, they obviously didn't teach you spelling and grammar.
Minor details, my dear, was a rounded education. So when's the big day?
We're to be married when he next gets leave.
Dennis, why do I have to type up all your plans?
There are whole reams of secretaries out there.
My work is far too secret for them. Most secret for your eyes only. Destroy immediately after reading. Please burn and bury the ashes in the garden. Cut into small pieces. Chew and swallow while knocking back a fine claret. All that sort of stuff.
Dennis, what does this say? To sap the enemy's will, I hereby propose the installation in Germany of a spirit level.
No. Spiritual. A spiritual leader. You know, drop pamphlets, radio broadcasts, pull all the propaganda strings, build him up, and use him to undermine the German people's support for the Führer.
As a first stage towards...
A mass rebellion against Hitler, paving the way for a British invasion.
Do you get replies to these proposals I've been typing up?
Well, yes.
Such as?
Such as, please come up with something better.
Our early failures meant we ended up fighting a war on two fronts. First, attempting to deceive the enemy. Second, trying to keep our own top brass on board.
In addition to coastal flame defences, I suggest, in the event of invasion, the deployment of women on horseback issued with trumpets to keep communication lines open.
Wooden bombs and Wheatley's more peculiar proposals weren't going to impress the powers that be. But I knew we had to make them take deception seriously.
And now, Colonel Turner, what do you have to say?
Deception is the key to winning this war. With deception, we can draw on enemy fire and exaggerate our strengths.
By draw his fire, do you mean have him waste his entire arsenal of wooden bombs?
Quite. Actually, I believe Colonel Turner's got a point, sir. If the Germans attack us now, our forces are so depleted we'll have a hell of a job stopping them marching straight into town.
Exploding rats and canvas planes aren't any use against an invading army.
Every bomb Hitler drops on a decoy site is one less to drop on our cities and airfields.
And if they believe our decoys are real, invasion appears far more hazardous.
Face it, man, your double-dealing is always going to be a sideshow to the main event. We've got to keep the Krauts off British soil.
I'm afraid, gentlemen, it's too late for that. Bombs aren't the only presents Hitler's been dropping on us. His spies are already here, sizing us out.
Hitler had his men in place, sending intelligence reports back to Berlin. They were the first wave of the invasion. And it was imperative they were hunted down and captured if we were to stand any chance of keeping the enemy at bay. A job for the charming but ruthless Major T.A. Robertson. Tar to his friends. Tar ran a division of MI5 which gave captured spies a choice. Work for us, or get a bullet in the head. Tar was our man inside the Secret Services. He added some real weight to the team. And his double agents were gathering information, helping us fight the Luftwaffe. Outnumbered 3-1, the boys of the RAF still saw them off. And in September 1940, we won the Battle of Britain. And later that year, another huge breakthrough. TAR's agents helped our codebreakers at Bletchley Park crack Enigma, the top-secret enemy code. Now we could guess what the Führer and his generals were up to, and they were none the wiser. Our team needed access to those intercepts to make deception work, so I sent TAR into battle at the Double Cross Committee, set up to oversee his agents.
So you still won't allow me access to intelligence from our codebreaker?
Access to most secret sources is severely restricted.
General Mansfield, if you tie my hands, it will be impossible to exploit one of the few advantages we have over the Germans.
You are one of the privileged few even to know about Ultra outside of Bletchley Park.
It was the work of my agents which allowed us to break the enemy code in the first place.
And if we allow them to play around with secret intercepts, we run a very real risk of killing the golden goose.
Don't you see, my agents can use Enigma as our way into the heart of the enemy high command.
Too hazardous. German intelligence will cotton on to the idea that we've cracked their most secret code.
Granted, there is a risk. But if my network is trusted, we can trap the enemy in a web of lies. We can make the tail wag the dog.
But how can we be sure your agents really are working for us? Your men are double-crossing criminals, prepared to sell their services to the highest bidder. How can we possibly have confidence in agents who are only cooperating because they know the alternative is the hangman's noose?
One example of how we can use them. The lull in the bombing campaign last week. The handiwork of a single new agent.
Each of TAR's agents was assigned a curious code name. But unless we got access to the intercepts, there was a limit to what the likes of Agents Celery, Tricycle and Snow could do.
Dodgy weather reports. Clever, but you can't keep on using that trick with the Luftwaffe.
Exactly my point. I need to build up my agent's profile through the controlled release of credible information.
Provide the enemy with accurate intelligence? That's treason.
The greater the advantage, the greater the price. My agent's reports are exaggerating our strength to deter Hitler from invading us, but such lies will only be believed if they rest upon the firm foundations of previous truths.
This newfangled deception racket seems to involve an awful lot of nonsense.
We can't just send out chicken feed if we are to convince Hitler that my agents are still working for them and that they are valuable!
Cook up whatever schemes you want, but no access to secret intercepts. Do you hear me?
Our struggle to get clearance for the secret intercepts continued. In the meantime, there was another way of using TAR's agents. Transmitting the locations of our fake sites to Berlin to try and persuade the enemy they were the real McCoy. And it started to work.
Right, here they come, let's look busy! Come on!
Private Williams has lost it, sir.
Come to us. We're being attacked, sir.
Yes, splendid, Williams. Good show.
Smashing the place to bits, sir.
Excellent, yes.
We need fighter cover, sir. They're wrecking our best decoys.
Haven't quite got the point of all this yet, Williams, have you? What the hell is Williams up to?
For God's sake, Williams, get away from there!
Almost 800 decoy sites spread out across the country, helping save both real planes and, more importantly, thousands of lives. Our handiwork had started to deliver. We did lose one of our own. But Private Williams's life wasn't in vain. He'd played his own small part in fooling Hitler. And events were about to take a dramatic turn.
Earth to earth, dust to dust, ashes to ashes.
It's off.
What's off?
We therefore commit Private Stanley Williams's body to the ground.
The German invasion. They've called off the whole bloody show. Come! Well, Hitler's more cautious than we realized. It seems he'll only invade if he's sure he can win. The RAF boys have stopped him winning control of the air. Your decoys do the sting out of his bombing campaign. And thanks to your agents, he thinks we're stronger than we actually are.
Hitler had backed down. Our tricks had helped the RAF foil the invasion. So he turned on the Russians instead. In June 41, his panzers started speeding towards Moscow. With the immediate threat of invasion over, suddenly that summer we had some breathing space. Time to think, to gather and regroup. And now we'd shown the powers that be what we could do. They had to take us seriously.
So the failure of the German invasion, General, is due in part to the work of my double agents. All we need now is permission to access Ultra so we can continue with successful future operations.
All right, Major Robertson. Permission granted. But any monkey business, or the first sign that Ultra is being compromised, and access will be withdrawn.
Of course, General, that goes without saying. I'm sure your faith...
Now we were cleared to work with the codebreakers, we could feed our lies into the heart of the German war machine. See what Hitler swallowed and fine-tune our handiwork accordingly. We really could try to make the tail wag the dog. Then in December, an early Christmas present. America. The cost was high. 2,000 dead and 5 battleships sunk. But after Pearl Harbor, we gained a powerful new ally. It was all beginning to look so much better. The time was right for us to try something really ambitious. Or so we thought.
Gentlemen, this war just stepped up a gear. We want to cross the channel and fight the enemy, face to face, man to man.
With respect, it's future ops understanding Hitler is confident of repulsing any Allied attack.
Confident my ass.
I think that what General Stimson is saying is that while we appreciate your efforts, our priorities have changed.
Winning battles involves more than trickery. Victory requires the unpleasant business of fighting and killing. And that is exactly what we propose to do. Take the war to the Germans.
Events have overtaken you. We're about to give the Hun a bloody nose.
The Germans still dominated Fortress Europe. Hitler called it his zone of destiny. But the chiefs of staff were itching for a fight. They made it pretty clear they didn't want our help. Almost overnight, support for deception evaporated. And then came the disastrous Allied raid on Dieppe. The first time since Dunkirk we tried to land a fighting force in Nazi-occupied Europe. No one at the top had listened when we told them we could provide deception cover for the raid. So it wasn't the Germans who got a bloody nose. That was when I knew we needed a figurehead. Someone who could fight our corner at the very top. And Colonel Johnny Bevan was the right man to convince the chiefs.
6,000 men sent out, and over 2/3 captured, wounded, or dead. That's what happens when you just roll up and try to poke the enemy in the eye with a stick. Fairbanks Jr. You were there, weren't you?
Yeah, but I landed away from the main action, which is why I'm here and not holed up in some POW camp.
Douglas Fairbanks Jr., the first American member of our team, a genuine Hollywood star, and now our point of contact with the Yanks.
It was clear from the outset that the raid was a mess.
Whenever the big one comes, I want deception to be a key part of the operation. I do not want to be standing here in 2 years' time telling you we've lost 100,000 men. I'm going to make sure we get a seat at the top table. The time has come to get organized.
The disaster at Dieppe was a turning point, proving that any major operation required a cover story of bluff and lies from us to throw the enemy off the scent. I started working with Bevan to give us focus, make us a proper team and develop new tactics. At last we had some clout. Energy and money poured into fresh schemes all across the country. One of our new units was based in Scotland. Sonic Deception, we called it. And it seemed to show some promise. So I sent Fairbanks Jr. up north to sniff around. We were secretly recording the sounds of battle. It was tricky work for the Sonic boys. Made all the harder if the local piper stopped by.
Shut up! Shut up! Get down here! Listen, mate, put a sock in it, will you? We're working here. And there's no time for Bonnie Prince Charlie or any roaming in the gloaming. OK, boys. Recorder ready?
Sonic Deception was designed to fool and hoax the enemy. But Fairbanks Jr. was about to get an early taste of what the Germans could expect.
Sorry, mate. Just having a bit of a laugh. Recorded sound. Amazing the effect it can have.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, I believe it's you fellas I've been sent here to meet. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., American Combined Forces Liaison Officer.
Big star. Well, keep your head down. We don't want you blowing our cover. No one's supposed to know we're here. Corporal Collins.
Well, how about you fellas show me a few more tricks of the trade, huh?
Right. Let me show you how this works.
Oh, I thought only RCA had this type of equipment.
This is RCA.
Really?
This is the latest gear from Hollywood.
Don't touch that, sir.
Sorry.
This is the stuff we have to cut out. Don't want to give the game away.
Of course.
Everything has to be perfect to be believed. You're creating the soundtrack for a war. And this is the stuff we have to put in. Can't be too clean. Bit of cussing adds authenticity. This is a bigger production than one of your movies.
But it'll never work.
In the dark it will. Kev? Close your eyes. Imagine you're a German lookout. Alone. At night.
Meanwhile, at Shepperton, the backroom boys were coming up with some fresh party tricks for the Nazis.
Ah, yes, Granger.
I wanted to introduce you to Rupert, sir.
What the devil is Rupert?
Our new secret weapon, sir.
What?
Excellent, excellent.
500 of those drop behind enemy lines, and we have got one hell of a diversion.
Everything was starting to come together. But there was still Dennis Wheatley to sort out. It took a little persuasion, but Bevan convinced me we could harness Wheatley's writer's imagination to good effect.
Ah, Wheatley, reading your work. Interesting, but a little, how shall I say, unfocused. And that's got to stop. If we're to convince Allied Command, we're more than just a bunch of Boy Scouts. And now is our moment of opportunity.
We never get anywhere because we aren't told anything.
Agreed, but they're a lot less cocksure after Dieppe. A successful deception operation now, and I can make certain we're taken seriously at the top.
But they've just put us all out to graze.
We need a directive. But since no one seems prepared to give us one, we'll just have to write the damn plan ourselves. We better get onto it. Oh, and Wheatley, one more thing. No more nonsense about black magic and spiritual leaders, eh?
We became increasingly ambitious, and Tar, our spy master, came through for us with more and more elaborate ruses.
So, what do you want?
Well, we need to up the stakes, put on a real show, something special for the German High Command.
What exactly are you proposing?
Sabotage. Agent Carrot and Agent Parsnip have been asked by their German controllers to bomb a plane factory in Hatfield.
Are you crazy, man? You want me to let your double-crossing vegetables undermine the war effort?
Ever the persuader, Tar finally got his way. He organized a carefully controlled explosion beside a plane factory. No real damage. But when the Germans read about the so-called sabotage, they were delighted. They sent the lucky agents a reward in cash, and we let them keep it for their good work. And we had an even bigger success. One dreamt up by a chap from MI5, with Tar lending a hand. Operation Mincemeat. A dead body dropped in Spanish waters. A briefcase chained to his wrist. And inside, fake love letters, a bank statement, and the bill for an engagement ring from a Bond Street jeweller's. That, and our secret plans for an attack on Sardinia. Fake plans, of course, which the Spaniards soon sent to their chums in Berlin. It worked a treat. Hitler moved his troops to Sardinia, and we stormed into Sicily instead. Deception was turning the tide of the war in our favor. The powers that be were drawing up plans for D-Day. And now they'd seen what we could do, they wanted us to buy them some time.
We've decided to give you chaps a crack of the whip.
What exactly are you proposing?
A full-scale tactical maneuver threatening northern France.
When?
We want you to pull out all the stops. Make them think the invasion's this August.
But that only gives us 3 months.
Look, you won't get another opportunity like this to prove yourselves.
Any successful operation needs to be long-term.
Yes, a decoy invasion takes as much time and planning as the real thing.
You've got 3 months, and that's that.
And so Operation Cockade was conceived. We'd sold them on deception, but they'd only bought half the story. They still wanted to do it their way, rushed and on the cheap. Right from the start, we didn't get the support we needed, and were reduced to fighting a dictator who dominated an entire continent by begging favors and borrowing supplies.
Gonna move on. We've got to finish this by dawn. Working as quickly as we can, Colonel. They don't put the real things together in 6 hours.
If you aren't fast enough, the whole lot has to come back down.
Why is that, sir?
Can't have the German plane spotting us.
Sir. Come on, put your back this way.
The centerpiece of Operation Cockade was to be a fleet of fake landing craft. We had to try and convince the Germans they were under attack from a mighty force, using steel tubes, rubber and rope.
Well done, lads. Excellent night's work. Hey.
The world's biggest Meccano kit, floating out at sea.
Actually, some of those landing craft are a little too good. Dirty them up a bit, will you?
Splash some sump oil on the sides. Try that.
Put some oil on the side of these craft, lads. Come on, look busy.
Once again, we tried to make the Nazis believe our decoys were real by sending Berlin reports of a huge naval buildup. But in September '43, our small fleet of decoys cruised into German waters, accompanied by real ships. We were expected to draw out the enemy, to convince the Germans we were testing their defenses in the build-up to a real invasion. For this to work, what we needed was serious backup, something we didn't have.
I don't see any planes. Maybe the Germans have overslept. Shall we give them a call, let them know we're here?
The Germans saw through it and didn't lift a finger, just sat back and laughed at us. Not a single shot was fired.
I understand the difficulties you face, Colonel Bevan, but this certainly falls well below expectations. You can be sure as hell Washington's gonna hear about this. Wasted time and money.
Operation Cockade. Cock-up, more like. We'd always had to fight on two fronts, and this time we'd lost on both of them. To the powers that be, we looked like time wasters. And now that the Fuhrer had smelt a rat, it would be much harder to fool him next time round. That's if there was a next time.
A total bloody balls up. Like a picnic than an invasion. I've got half of Whitehall breathing down my neck just when we needed their support. The PM's getting fidgety. And if we don't keep the Yanks on board, they're going to pull the plug on us.
The failure of Cockade was a massive blow. We knew it hadn't worked because it wasn't given enough backing. Their mistake, not ours. A failure which could have sidelined us for the rest of the war. Just when the most ambitious operation ever planned, D-Day, was given the go-ahead by the Allied leaders for the summer of '44. The clock was ticking, and 4 years of our lives would have been wasted unless we won battles at home and in Washington.
Are you goddamn limey sons of bitches ever actually gonna get off your asses and invade? Or are you happy to keep playing soldiers, toy soldiers? Lives are at stake here. We should storm in and take the beaches. Christ, we've got almost 1 million of our boys stationed in your country. We should be able to mount a decent invasion without having to resort to fairy tales to fool Hitler.
But look what happened to Dieppe, where we had no cover story.
Forget Dieppe. Dieppe was one small operation. I'm talking about the liberation of Europe. And while we're at it, what about Cockade, when you did have a cover story?
We are battling against a perpetrator of mass genocide who has disregarded everything that makes us human, who has brought an evil power to bear on a whole continent. And you're suggesting we resort to trickery to defeat him?
Gentlemen, we're on the same side here. I'm simply proposing that illusion and cunning will increase our chances of defeating Hitler.
All your Trojan horse tomfoolery seems to have made you to forget what this war is supposed to be about. We're fighting for freedom against a bunch of murderous Nazis.
You're suggesting cockade all over again. Only this time it won't be just an embarrassing day trip. It'll be a total bloody disaster.
The failure of cockade is down to people like you who never took it seriously.
How dare you?
Take Operation Mincemeat. We delivered Sicily to you using one dead body. Not to mention North Africa.
What about North Africa? In North Africa, we were given all the resources we required and based our whole campaign on duping the enemy.
Success in North Africa depended on our make-believe maneuver being given as much importance as the attack itself. The obvious place to attack was here in the north, but we made Rommel think it was going to come down here in the south. We achieved this by building a fake water pipeline 20 miles south of where the real onslaught would be launched. And alongside the pipeline, we moved dummy tanks, guns, and soldiers. This was film production on a grand scale. A job for men who knew the right way to dress the set.
Precisely because it had been so successful, the deception at El Alamein was top secret. Even some of our own commanders had been kept in the dark.
What was so special about El Alamein?
The Germans knew you couldn't fight a battle in the desert without water. When their reconnaissance planes spotted all this activity, they put 2 and 2 together to make 5. Meanwhile, in the north, a huge buildup of real troops and tanks was disguised as a harmless supply depot. And then on the night of November the 25th, we achieved the dream of every commander through the ages. Complete tactical surprise.
The covers came off the tanks and guns, all hell was let loose, and we gave them a damn good thrashing.
El Alamein, our first great victory and a turning point in the war.
So you propose we mount a small tactical diversion before we retake Europe?
No. We're suggesting the entire plan to invade France is based on the tactics used in North Africa.
Deception has to be more than just a sideshow.
It must form an entire second front in the campaign.
The danger with your so-called second front is that it jeopardizes the main event. Do you seriously expect me to risk the lives of hundreds of thousands of men who are not just soldiers, but husbands and fathers too? Are you asking me to do this on the basis of a single battle, fought over a piece of scrubland in the desert?
Yes, sir. I am.
We were given a reprieve, of sorts. They wanted to test us, to see if we really could fool German intelligence on a large scale. Many at the top doubted we could pull it off, but we had a few tricks up our sleeve. We set about creating our phantom army from canvas, wood, and rubber.
There you are. 8 men, a foot pump, and in 20 minutes you've got yourself a tank.
They're churning out 50 of these a day at the Dunlop factory. We're making an entire rubber army.
To make Hitler think our decoy armies were real, we pulled a few strings and got the RAF to let the odd spy plane slip through. Couldn't let them fly too low, though, or they'd rumble us.
Lockhart! Make sure you miss the buggers. Well, if you shoot them down, Hitler will never find out we're here.
Shouldn't have said that. He's a terrible shot anyway. If he tries to miss, he'll hit it.
You think they saw us?
I bloody hope so.
We started to use the newspapers too, dropping in little hints, clues which an alert enemy might spot. Reports of army football matches, soldiers' weddings, dinner dances, and that sort of thing. None of which actually took place.
The newspapers? Need to check out your handiwork.
Letters to the editor became my favourite.
A vicar, distressed by the moral collapse since a vast number of American paratroopers have invaded the area, is complaining about the immense number of rubber contraceptives found around the American bases at Marham and Coggeshall.
Dennis, not another of your crude letters.
Actually, that wasn't one of mine. It's bloody good, though. Got a certain logic. Rubber soldiers using rubber contraceptives so as to avoid having little rubber babies.
Intelligence told us the Germans were buying our lives, and the fake armies had them fooled. Now we wanted more. A central role in the execution of D-Day itself. I supervised operations on the ground while Bevan and Wheatley burnt the midnight oil.
Johnny, if this goes in as it is, we're going to get the sack.
Really? Why?
You've made it all so long and complicated that no one will be able to understand it.
But all the arguments are in a proper sequence. It's perfectly logical.
Yeah, but they give the impression it has about as much chance of success as you and I have of getting around the Grand National on a donkey.
Dennis, we have to submit an accurate assessment of the risks. We can't argue it's certain to be successful.
But in its present form, it sounds like it's bound to fail.
Well, what do you suggest?
Outline the operation. Put all the negatives in a nice long appendix, which they'll never bother to read, and they'll swallow it all like lambs. What?
And then the big day came. The day we would get the final thumbs up or thumbs down. It was up to me to convince Allied command our rubber armies could thwart Case 3. Case 3. The Führer's elite panzer divisions kept in reserve specifically to overwhelm any attempt at invasion.
We have created a series of fake armies and imaginary threats to each corner of the Reich in order to make Hitler spread his forces more thinly. Why, it's a well-recognized military maxim that he who tries to be strong everywhere is in fact weak everywhere.
And we know that since Dunkirk, Hitler has been unable to establish our military strength with any degree of accuracy.
My double agents have been consistently exaggerating our capabilities. Hitler now presumes our forces to be twice their actual size.
We plan to distract Hitler and his high command by fatally infecting them with grand delusions. In other words, make them run around like blue-ass flies. The most logical place to strike would seem to be here, the part of Calais, where the channel is at its narrowest and it's easier to provide air cover. Now, we know the landings will actually take place in Normandy, but every element of Operation Bodyguard will be used to convince Hitler the attack will come in Calais in July rather than Normandy in June.
Well, what happens when the troops do land? The game will be up then.
All it takes is for Hitler to activate Case 3 and his crack panzer divisions and reserve forces will come streaking down the beachhead.
First, if we can achieve surprise, that'll be a huge advantage. Second, if we are successful, he'll never activate Case 3.
Well, what's to stop him?
Operation Bodyguard. We're going to sell him the line that the Normandy landings are a first tactical maneuver before a much greater invasion force targets Calais.
Remember, Hitler believes we have 2 million more men than we actually do.
Even if we send 20 divisions to Normandy, Hitler will still think we've got 40 in reserve, ready to open up a second invasion front right here. Gentlemen, we're going to take him into an Alice in Wonderland world where white is black and black is white. Even after the Normandy landings, he'll still be waiting for the real invasion.
It'll never work. But it'll bloody well have to.
Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin, they've all signed up to the deception plan, in principle at least.
We only have 6 months to make good on our promises. And there's still plenty of skeptics to convince.
Yeah, but remember, the PM's on our side.
According to him, in wartime, the truth is so precious, she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. Well, we are that bodyguard. To Operation Bodyguard and fooling Hitler.
Fooling Hitler!
Now Operation Bodyguard was second in importance only to the invasion itself. We needed something special to make Hitler think we meant business. And we got it. The legendary General Patton, known to one and all as Old Blood and Guts. We put him in charge of FUSAG, the first US Army group, the most important of our phantom armies.
As you will appreciate, I cannot reveal my precise location. Suffice to say, it is somewhere in the east of England. And a remarkable spectacle it is too. Thousands of men preparing for battle. Here comes a tank battalion now. And I am joined by General Patton. General Patton, sir, how are you finding your time in England?
All I have to say is that I am honored to lead troops of this caliber into battle. Now let's cut the guts out of those krauts and get the hell on to Berlin. And when I get to Berlin, I'm gonna personally shoot that son of a bitch Hitler, just like I would a snake.
To back up our story, we got one of our agents, Brutus, a cover job at FUSAG, so we could send Berlin reports of our phony troop buildup. FUSAG was growing before their eyes. Or so we bloody hoped.
Come on, come on, come on, come on! Get that cable over here!
Any army generates huge amounts of radio noise.
Back of the B unit.
All the wireless traffic from the real troop buildup on the other side of the country was routed through 1,200 miles of cable and transmitted from FUSAG. To German ears, FUSAG sounded like the real thing. To General Patton, though, it was anything but. He'd been sidelined into leading a rubber army because he'd slapped 2 shell-shocked soldiers. Not his favorite posting, by all accounts.
I'm a soldier. I fight where I'm told, and I win where I fight. Compared to war, all other forms of human endeavor shrink to insignificance. But this is beyond me. There's only one tactical principle that cannot change. It is to use the means at hand to inflict maximum wound, death, and destruction on the enemy in a minimum amount of time. What we have here has nothing to do with that. I should be preparing for the real invasion. The sting. The clash of battle. I think I'm gonna go fire off a few rounds. Leave me.
Britain became one huge floating fortress. Every day, troops, tanks, planes and boats arrived from America. We tried to hide the real build-up and let the Germans find out about the fake one. Our intelligence suggested they were buying it. And then, with less than a month to go, disaster struck.
Sir, one of Major Robertson's spies has gone missing.
One rogue radio message to Berlin and the whole operation could collapse. The hunt for Agent Haddock began. A top spy we needed to reel back in. And if the Germans saw through the deception, soon enough they'd work out the truth about the real landings. All we could do was cross our fingers and keep on cooking the books. The preparations for D-Day had to continue. Everything hung in the balance. Then Agent Haddock came in from the cold.
But I didn't do anything.
You disappeared for a week, directly contravening orders and risking our entire operation, and you said you did nothing.
I was just putting together the usual material to keep Berlin quiet, like you told me to.
Photos, notes, diagrams.
You're supposed to stay in constant contact. We've had an entire section of MI5 out searching for you.
I'm tired of the whole setup. I don't want to be part of it anymore.
I don't think you're going to be, Haddock.
Why am I called after a fish, anyway?
Does it really matter?
Yes. I think I'd like to be called something a little more distinguished.
A man who, at the beginning of the war, tries to sell out to the Germans. He's only switching sides when he was caught. Who then decides life as a double agent would be preferable to a bullet in the head, but who goes on once again to endanger Britain's future, wants a distinguished name. I think Agent Worm would be more appropriate.
I'm sure your other agents have much better names.
You're not even supposed to know there are other agents. Look, let's get down to business, shall we? I want to know exactly what you've been doing over the past week, Haddock. You're almost certainly going to be spending the rest of the war in jail anyway. But right now, I want to know everything about your little escapade, or it's a 6 o'clock walk for you.
6 o'clock what?
You'll be shot at dawn.
It looked like Tar had got to Haddock before he'd blabbed. The spy network was safe as far as we could tell. The countdown to D-Day continued. Then, after months of frantic activity, D-Day.
The order's been given. No more delays. We're on our way.
The real invasion had begun. Soon, it would be our turn.
It started.
By D-Day, we drummed up reinforcements for General Patton's imaginary army of 1 million men. Other decoy outfits stationed around the country. Countless fake tanks, guns and platoons dotted the countryside. And if we'd got it right, Hitler would think they were the real thing, being held in reserve to mount an attack 1 month later on Calais, bigger even than D-Day itself. But if we'd got it wrong, thousands of brave men would never return from Normandy.
You know Lady E's husband's in the first wave. Look, Johnny, when we cooked up this plan, it was easy. We didn't have to think about people like him, real people, real families. Look, if we get this wrong, they'll be the ones who'll have to pay for our mistake.
Snap out of it, man. This is no time for defeatist talk. Besides, you know Turner's mob have come up with a few little surprises for Jerry, don't you?
Not more unfortunate creatures stuffed with explosives, I have.
Not animals this time, no. Our battalion of Rupert should have landed by now.
Well, the Dole paratroopers
should be causing quite a stir with a little help from their friends.
Along with the Ruperts came commandos, armed with gramophones, and a sonic deception soundtrack to unnerve the enemy even further. The first in a series of operations designed to throw the Germans off the scent and divert their attention away from the real invasion. Next, Operation Taxable went into action. The Dambusters Squadron, flying a tight formation, each plane dropping 5 loads of foil every minute.
Holen Sie das Unteroffizier sofort!
On German radar, the planes looked like a massive armada, drawing enemy firepower and resources away from the real action. A diversion lent credibility by boats mounted with loudspeakers, which blasted out the soundtrack of a decoy invasion.
Switch her on!
The question was, would it work? Thousands of lives were at stake. The Normandy landings. The biggest invasion force the world has ever seen. Over 10,000 planes and 7,000 ships. 160,000 troops flinging themselves onto beaches codenamed Omaha, Utah, Juneau, Sword and Gold. As the bullets flew, our desperate hope was that we'd done enough to prevent the Germans hitting the panic button.
Here is a special bulletin read by John Snack. D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress. The first official news came just after 9:30.
I have to hand it to you. I never thought you'd do it. But now we have to keep them believing there'll be a second invasion in Calais, or Hitler will activate Case 3.
We've surprised them, and that's one in the eye for the Germans. But it'll count for nothing if Hitler sends over the panzers.
Our reports suggest they're getting twitchy.
If Operation Bodyguard fails, there'll be carnage on the beaches.
As we were establishing a bridgehead in Normandy, an argument raged in Berlin. Some of Hitler's generals insisted D-Day was the real thing, that there would be no second invasion in Calais, and now was the time to hit back with Case 3. Others disagreed. Our fate depended on which of the two factions the Führer believed. Then the news came in.
They're not buying it anymore. The panzers are on the move.
He's going to do his level best to Dunkirk us.
Hitler had activated Case 3. Our boys could be massacred, thrown back into the sea.
How long before the panzers reach Normandy?
48 hours till the first wave arrive.
Tar, this is the acid test. It's time to see what your agents can really do.
For the next 48 hours, we bombarded German High Command with lies. We had to make them believe we intended to mount a second, much larger invasion, hundreds of miles from the fighting in Normandy. Those 48 hours were the longest of my life.
Sir, there's an urgent message.
It's a decrypt from the German handler of one of our agents. I've come to the conclusion that the Normandy operations are a tactical maneuver intended to fool us into sending our reserves so that the decisive assault can be launched at another point. Ha! Hitler's agreed. He's cancelled Case 3.
Hitler was holding his panzer divisions back, expecting our Phantom Army to invade any day. But each day he waited helped our troops on their long march to Berlin. And to sustain the illusion, we kept a less than happy General Patton kicking his heels at Fuzak.
If they actually let me get over there and fight, I pity the German soldiers we'll be going up against. By God, I do. Because we'll not only just shoot them, we'll cut their living guts out of them and use them to grease the treads of our tanks.
July 44, the Battle of Caen. We were fighting our way through France, and it was time for me to see some real action again. It was a wonderful moment to set foot on French soil again, 4 years after being thrown out of Dunkirk.
Take a look, sir. What is it? The order of battle.
Fuzag, the threat to Norway, Calais, Turkey, they've swallowed the whole bloody lot. We fooled Hitler good and proper, lads. They've even got us down as the British Fourth Army.
That is correct.
The British Fourth Army doesn't exist. None of that matters. All that counts is we're here to liberate Europe.
Remembrance season continues tonight on ITV4 with a gritty and suspenseful thriller about the investigation of a series of brutal murders during the Nazi occupation in Eastern Europe. The Night of the Generals, starring Omar Sharif, is next.